Sergio here, aka Surgical FPV, doing a little troubleshooting video on a Vortex 250 Pro. As you can see, I'm using my original Vortex. It's decked out. It's got a few upgrades: red bottoms, 2300 kV, Emax motors. It's got auto bind Spectrum receiver that I put on there, the Runcam Eagle, and basically just did a rebuild on it. New motherboard, new VTX, and flight controller. So I took the antenna off for now, just to make things a little bit easy. I'm going to go ahead and start taking off the props and taking apart all the screws on the top plate, and then we'll catch back up and move forward from there. I'm going to troubleshoot my back right motor, which seems to be arming, but when I take off, it's not getting the speed that it needs to. So let's see what's going on. What's up, guys? Just about finished taking off the last few screws here, and I've got the props off each motor. The motor that I'm troubleshooting is the back right motor here. As you can see, it's already taken off. I don't think it's the motor. Could be wrong. I have a spare, which I'm going to go ahead and put in there just in case. The ESC is brand new. I know that's not it. So hopefully we can get to the bottom of this pretty quickly. I wanted to start filming before taking off the top plate, just to let some of you new Vortex owners know that when you take this apart, there's going to be a little spring that comes out underneath the little screws in the center part that you take off the top plate. There are 4 small screws just like this one, and the back 2 you don't have to worry about, the ones that I'm doing now. But the front 2, which I already took off, you're going to notice a spring is resting underneath those 2. And that spring has 2 little holes, one on each side, for the top little screws that I was just talking about to go through. And they're going to be held in place with the 2 holes on the side plates. So what this spring is going to do is basically allow these 3 wires here, or cables and wires, to rest on that spring, and it won't then touch the video transmitter below it and shake it around, just basically to suspend it. So make sure it's in there. It is kind of best practice to reinstall that. That probably wouldn't really do anything if you didn't. It would probably work fine, but it's there for a reason, so use it. And I'm going to go ahead and basically start to figure out what's going on with this back right motor that, like I said, it arms, it spins fine, but when I go to take off and give it some thrust, it just doesn't thrust up, whereas the other motors do, and it kind of does one of those clockwise rotations because the motor on the back right's not moving as fast as the others. I suspect a few different things might be causing this. One, which I doubt, because I'm kind of, I guess I try to be a little confident in my soldering abilities, but there might be a bridge. It's a possibility, so we're going to check that out. I did install this brand new ESC, which is definitely installed correctly onto the main plate there. We've just got the 2 little solder points. Red goes to positive, black to negative, and then the servo cables here that are basically ports that you plug into. So there's no problem with the soldering onto the motherboard or to the main board or whatever you want to call it, but there might be a problem here with either this motor, which isn't a brand new motor, or the connection point. Again, I don't think that's the case. Just looking at these wires here, actually I see a little breakage here. I don't know if you can see that, which could very well be causing this thing to go haywire. These motors are very delicate and prone to having issues, to be honest. So I'm going to take a look at this a little bit closer here, see if there's any. Yeah, it does look like there's a little bit of a tear there. So I think it would be worth trying to patch this before we do anything else. It does look like there's a little slit and some of the wires are frayed. So what I'm going to do is get out some heat shrink and split that wire, solder it back together, and hopefully it'll start working from there. I'm going to go ahead and take my soldering gun. Comes with a little sponge here to basically wipe off your solder point, if you can see that back there. It's a very good soldering gun. I recommend it. Get this little sponge wet, clean off the solder tip every time you're about to use it. And it works really well. I think it was about $60 or $70 at the hobby store. But I use it all the time, and I couldn't be happier with it. So, first I need to get my wire cutters. Gonna go ahead and just cut this last cable here at the end that's frayed, right where the fraying is, so that I could just go ahead and reconnect it with a clean solder. There won't be any frayed wires, and hopefully that'll solve the problem I'm having. I'm gonna go ahead and strip the ends. The way you want to do a solder, hopefully you've already done some soldering before, but if you haven't, just a general tip is to more of a best practice, not necessarily a tip that I have that isn't known by everybody that solders. You want to put some solder at the end of the connection points before actually making the connection. So I've got the two connection points. Hopefully you can see them. Right angle, and basically I'm going to go ahead and just make some contact here with the solder and try to get it to melt right over the connection point. I want to get a good amount because we are making a bridge here, a connection, and usually it's easier to do if there's a little bit of excess with these types of solder jobs. I'm going to go ahead and wipe off the solder tip over here and grab a pair of my surgical precision calipers, which I love to use because it makes me feel like a surgeon. I'm going to get my 5-arm here and just hold this one here like that. And go ahead and there's really no science to this. You just need to make sure it's connected well. So I want to try and get it as clean as possible so that the points are completely connected. Let it dry for a sec, and the solder just tends to melt over anything you rub the tip on, so doesn't look like there's any frayed pieces that are left over. It looks like it's firmly connected there. Oh crap, but I did forget to put the heat shrink on. It's okay, I'm just going to use a little bit of electrical tape. Should do the trick. Tiny bit. Should do the trick. A little square like that, and just basically make sure it's wrapped up. You don't really have to worry if it doesn't look pretty here. It just needs to be a little layer of protection, just as good as a heat shrink. Now what you want to do is make sure you don't bend it too much. Don't want that to crack the connection point. It can crack. Hopefully it doesn't. And I'm just going to rest it in there carefully. The ESC. The ESC wires will either go through the bottom of the arm if you have upgraded your arms and your entire plastic set with what's known as the pimp kit. I got a pimp kit online just because some of my arms started to break over time and the screw holes were getting stripped and my screws weren't going in the right way. So the new ones, you have to come in underneath with the wires. You can't put them in the grooves like I just did. Just make sure you take note of that before you go putting everything together or taking it apart. I'm going to go ahead and slide this arm back in to the clip and put the motor back up here. I'm going to go ahead and just get the motor bell or the motor plastic piece here that is supposed to go into the bottom of the motor. Just probably shouldn't have used all the screws at the same time. Alright, let's see here. Alright, so try to get one at a time. Makes the job a little bit easier. Just gonna make it finger tight for now. Try to make them finger tight in the beginning, and then go around and tighten them all in an X pattern. So if you're going in with the top right screw first, do the bottom left next, and that'll allow you to get the motors in there evenly, or get the screws into the motors evenly. For now, I'm just gonna leave those two in there and perform a little test. It looks like my LED connector here is it's got a cut wire as well. Actually, look at that. So I'm gonna fix that while I'm at it. It's basically just the black wire. I don't even know if you can see it. It's cut there, so the black wire needs to be fixed. Same thing, we're just gonna have to strip this. Honestly, this is such a small wire, I'm probably just gonna use my finger to strip it. My fingernail just cut it right off and slid it right off perfectly. Same with this one. This is going to require a very, very small amount of solder. Probably just want to get some on the tip of my solder gun, like I just did, and just dab the tip of the wire so that it gets just enough on there to make a little connection. Okay, and same thing with the other one. Maybe just try and make a little connection here. So I got the two tips pre-tuned with a little solder. I'm going to get my handy dandy 5-arm again. This thing is just going to become handy now, so I can hold this. Excuse me. Just getting over a flu. So let's see here. We have the 5-arm holding it in place. So this wire right here, if you could see it, is kind of pointing in the direction I need it to. This time I'm going to add the heat shrink ahead of time. Just put a little tiny piece. This might be a little too thick. I might have some extra. It's thinner. Yeah, this is 1/16, so I'm going to use this instead. This is actually too long of a piece. We need a really small piece here. Alright, so that's good to go. Gonna go ahead and grab that and basically just connect it there. Alright, it's done. Bring the heat shrink out and over the connection point. So the connection point's now being covered by the heat shrink. A little unorthodox method of heat shrinking, but it works. Good to go. The wrap shrinks when you heat it, hence the name heat shrink. And it's connected now. So I'm going to put this LED board back into place with the two little, I guess, grooves here and the little rivets that come out of the bottom. Just kind of slide it right in there and start to get to work on putting the spring into place that we took off earlier, which I explained is important to kind of just keep there when you're putting it back together. It's a little tricky to do, but once you take apart a Vortex about 100 times, it'll become easy. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and just demonstrate my technique for putting this back on. I'm going to get my little screw back on the tip of my micro hex here, and basically come in as close as I can to making contact with the hole here that's resting right underneath this metal spring. As you can see, I just moved it out of the way. But essentially, I bring the frame really close, and then I lift the spring up and kind of just twist a little so that the spring kind of locks into the screw. Let's see if I can even just lift it a little bit and start twisting, and the frame will get caught in the thread of the screw. And if you put it right over the screw hole, obviously it'll go straight down in and secure itself. So you'll see the spring sticking out on the other side. So you kind of want to just move it into place as close as you can. Line up all the screw holes on the rest of the frame so you know you're over the screw hole that lies over the spring. Get the screw in there. Push it in the spring end with your nail or maybe a flathead screwdriver until you kind of feel it catch into the thread. And don't over tighten these because you're going into plastic, and eventually you'll strip out the inner threading there. I'm going to go ahead and just put like one screw on each arm for now, just to secure the shakes and test it out, so I don't have to go through the process of putting on every single screw. As you may know, this is a, oh, the LED came out a little bit. Since it's not fully secure, it's easy to kind of pop back in there. But once you got the once you have the entire thing put together and all the screws in there, it's not so easy. So just make sure if you're gonna tighten some screws that the LED is in there securely. Now when you tighten up the back, the LED gets kind of stuck in there, and that's how you want it. So it's not falling out while you fly. I'm going to put two screws on each side, the back and the front, right in the middle, to kind of just hold everything in place, and then do a test on the motor and see what happens. Be back in a second. Alright guys, I'm back. I'm plugging her in. It's still making that beeping noise, so I have a feeling there's still something wrong. Yeah, it's not spinning here, so I don't think it was that connection point that we fixed. Strange, because it's connected fine. I don't know what's going on. Believe it or not, earlier when I was at the park, I did that and it worked. But it was armed and it wasn't getting the power, as I mentioned, to take off. It was just arming. So looks like we have to troubleshoot a little bit more, which is why I'm glad I didn't take on or put on all the screws. Just got to take off 4. Alright, so we've got the frame open again. I'm going to go ahead and check out this back right arm here. Take this top clip off, get in there with my tools, remove the motor, and basically replace it with a brand new one when all else fails. As I mentioned, I really do not think it has anything to do with the ESC connection, but we're gonna have to take it off anyway. We'll double, triple check it. Maybe it's not impossible. Surgical FPV might have farmed the soldering job earlier. I don't think so though. Nope. Soldering job is basically flawless. If you don't believe me, boom shot right there. That is basically a clean solder. I mean, it's not machine, grade, but there's definitely no bridging. So, only thing we can do now is start to remove the motor. Okay, basically just going to go ahead and take off one solder tip, point, or whatever. Remove one wire at a time. Got one. Two. Basically just resting my soldering tip on the edge of the solder connection points until the solder melts, and then pull it right off. I could do that at a better angle while I'm putting it on for you guys. So there are the 3 soldering points that I just took it from. Those wires were right there. Took them all off, one at a time. And what I'm going to do now is grab my replacement Emax, which, as a drone enthusiast, you're always going to have backups. Fortunately, with the Emax motors, it doesn't matter which way they spin. Essentially, you can program it to spin in any direction that you want with ease. So we'll go ahead and show you how to do that. The Emax motors are really nice. They come with a wire that's a little bit too long, so I just took off about 1/3 of an inch off each one. And I'm going to go ahead and just strip off, not that much. You don't want to strip off too much. Do maybe like an 1/8 of an inch. I don't know if that's an 1/8, about that much is good. There's no science to it. Just get some exposure of that wire there. And as we said earlier, it's the best practice whenever doing soldering to tune your endpoints a little bit. You want to make sure your wires are not going crazy like nappy hair or pointing all over the place. You want it to be, you can even twist it a little bit, all the wires, so that they're bunched up together nicely, so that when you apply your solder, it kind of turns all of those micro wires into one big piece of metal. Okay, so I got the left one done. Got the middle one. And got the last one to the right. Cleaned off my solder tip. And now I'm just going to go ahead and start connecting. So, general tip here, best practice, always start with the middle if there's 3. Makes the job a heck of a lot easier. You want to go in there very straight so that when you do start melting it, the solder, it dries very clean and straight, and minimizing the chance of bridging over to its neighboring solder points, which if you have any touch or bridging, any of your 3, if they touch at all, you're going to get a short, and you might fry your ESC, or it just may not run. So we got the right one, got the middle one, I'm sorry, got the left one, got the middle one. I'm about to finish off with the right one here. Just want to make sure I grab it at a good angle. It's all about your angles and the way you pinch this stuff and the way you lay it on. Alright, so looks like there's a little piece of straight wire there. Now it looks like a very clean and precise job there. I'm not concerned about any bridging or any incomplete connections, so should be good to go. And apparently medical marijuana just got legalized in Florida, and a lot of my friends are going crazy about it on social media. Shame on them. Drugs are bad. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just tape up this slice that I made on my heat shrink there. Little electrical tape goes a long way in many cases. Okay, so we're all tidied up here. Move my 5-arm out of the way, move this motor case, move all this stuff out of the way, get myself organized for another test. I'm going to go ahead and put this back together and we'll be back. Alright, so we've got everything put back together now. Put a new motor on. Also realized that some of the screws at the bottom going into the motors were a bit longer than the others, so not a huge difference there. I think we're talking 12 millimeter versus a 9 millimeter here on the screw length. That can cause problems. Some of my motors were working with all the 12 millimeter screws just fine, but it's technically supposed to be a 9 millimeter, not a 12 millimeter screw. That goes on the bottom of each motor here. So make sure that when you, hope you guys like my sticker, make sure that when you're putting your motors in that you have the 9 millimeter, not the 12, which are used for the top plates for each arm. The front two are also 9 millimeter, so make sure that that's the case. And let's go ahead and power it up. Got my remote just powered up. And just gonna go ahead and arm it. Looks like all of my motors are spinning. I'm gonna go ahead and throttle up. Looks like they're all getting the necessary power they need, which means mission accomplished. Thanks for watching, guys. More tunes and builds and troubleshooting videos coming soon. As always, make sure to like, +1, tweet, share, follow, subscribe, and all of the above to Surgical FPV and the many social media outlets that it has a presence on. Thanks again. Have a great night. Over and out.